Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crypto Economics Lab at the University of Cincinnati campus. I am your host, Sunshine, and we engage in conversation, education, innovation in Web3, blockchain, and crypto economics. I am excited to continue our monthly series, Women in Crypto, Blockchain, and Web3. This series will explore women who are pushing boundaries in the digital world and introducing a paradigm shift in how new technology is introduced and used. Today, I'm going to be joined by Tricia Wang, and we are going to talk about the power of Web3. Tricia is an outstanding example of leadership with words of inspiration that you do not want to miss. By the way, if you are new to this channel, be sure you follow us and give us a thumbs up if you like our content. We have some amazing guests coming your way. Let's move over to the interview with Tricia Wang. Innovation Interview focuses on students and scholars who are making a great impact on cryptocurrency and blockchain and Web3 adoption.
If you want to actually grow your company or learn anything new, you cannot just rely on numbers. That stuff is not quantified.
Got thrown out of the finance club in college because I was talking about Bitcoin.
Tricia is a technology ethnographer. She studies people's use of technology and focuses on a deep understanding of community needs. She started early as a documentary filmmaker at NASA, went on to obtain her PhD in sociology, and created the term, I love it, thick data, used for her qualitative data collection. She's a keynote speaker. She's presented at TED Talk, titled Human Insights Missing from Big Data in 2017, which I want to talk about, by the way. Tricia is also the founder of Sudden Compass, a consulting firm working with Fortune 500 companies, and most recently, the founder of the company Cradle, the Crypto Research and Design Lab. Thank you for your time and being here today. First, Tricia, tell me something about yourself that maybe most people don't know.
I put so much of my life out there. People can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. So I don't, something I guess like I don't write about very often is that I take care of my grandmother, and she's the most important person to me in the world and foundational to who I am. And I think in America, we don't take care of our elders, and not everyone has had the privilege of being raised by their elders. So, I know that is, some people don't know their elders, and some people may not have good relationships with the elders because there's a lot of trauma in families. But if people do have had the opportunity to really know their elders, I think as you're adulting, to not forget them. And so she's very central to my life.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you probably learned a lot, and it keeps you real and in the present as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, it's my understanding that you created the title Global Tech Ethnographer. I love that.
That's right.
You created your own title. So you are describing yourself with your title. Can you just tell us how you became interested in this field and what that means to you?
Yeah, so I created a term because, so I'm really excited to speak to you all because every year I get asked to do a few talks for universities, and I actually wish more people would reach out. But it's so important for me to talk to people who are students right now, because I used to be a student. I used to be a student as an undergrad, and I was a student when I was a PhD student, and I was a student when I was in high school. And in all of those periods, it's an incredible moment where you get the luxury. If you get to be a student, it's such a privilege, because you're literally adding no value to society. You are not laboring, and maybe you're doing, side work, of course, like many of us. Like I had to work on the side, but like you're really not adding value. You're like probably getting a scholarship, or your family's paying for you, or you're, maybe, but most of your time is spent studying, and reading. And it's also an incredible, but I do think it's one of the most important periods, formational periods, where you do figure out, how do I be more intentional about my value in the world and like where I contribute, right? Beyond just being like an amazing person, but like what are the problems and solutions you want to work on? And I remember when I finished my PhD, when we first in my undergrad, I was incredibly lost. I never, I was never the person who like knew what they wanted to be or had a major. Like I switched a million times. And that's a whole funny story of how I even chose my major as an undergrad. So that's a side story. But that was formational for what I do now. But anyways, as a graduate student, when I finished, I knew very clearly that I did not want to go into academia. And I was, I'm trained as a sociologist, so I know how to do quant and qual work. I knew that I wanted to be in business, in the industry and private sector. And I had already worked at Nokia. I already had a fellowship. I had already was working in the research labs as a researcher, as an ethnographer, on the research team, in their lab in Palo Alto. And it was my dream job. And I remember when I finished grad school officially, it's like, okay, I have a great resume. I've been at Nokia. It's my dream to be in tech. Like, I cannot wait to be recruited or to talk to, companies that are going to want me to run their data, like to actually oversee their data. And because I'm one of those rare birds who can actually balance the quantitative, all the data analytics that a company is gathering, all the numbers. And I also understand the value of the human experience, and that if you want to actually grow your company or learn anything new, you cannot just rely on numbers. That stuff is not quantified. And I had already I already done a lot of work in that area. But to my surprise, no company wanted to work with me. I couldn't find a job. I was totally lost, and I was really naive because I didn't understand how organizations actually function, which is that they're very siloed, right? So you have your data people right here, and this is like right when data science was becoming big. And then you have your marketing people here who probably oversee the qualitative. But really overall, what I saw at Nokia, which is the topic of my TED Talk, which is that companies did not value ethnographic data, the data that is qualitative, that is like not in the form of numbers. And I was shocked because I was like, why wouldn't you value that? You need that to understand the context of the numbers that you're gathering, the statistics and the analytics. But big data was like really on the rise, and AI was just beginning to be seen as something that businesses would, be playing with and working with as part of their core assets. And so I couldn't find a job. And so I was like, well, what is it that I do? How do I, distinguish myself in the market? How do I even describe and market myself? And I had no intentional plan other than like, well, really, I'm an ethnographer. No one knows what that is. So, at least like that captures the core of who I am. And I love studying how people use technology. And I do this globally. I've been doing it all around the world. So I'll call myself a global tech ethnographer. I'll put that on my resume or LinkedIn, whatever people use at the time. I can't remember. And then I was like, people will be confused, but at least they'll ask questions, right? And then like that will pull me towards the companies that will want to work with me. And it actually worked, because I had to explain what it was. And I found companies who actually said, we're not going to hire you because you're not a good fit to be hired internally, because you wouldn't really survive because you don't have that experience working inside a corporation as an employee long term, which is true. Because before grad school, I had been in the arts as a filmmaker. I had been working in nonprofits and as a community organizer, working in media, working in after school programs, working with really underrepresented communities. So when I couldn't get a job, I said, I'm going to just start writing about my experiences. I'm going to write publicly about the value of qualitative data. I'm going to help business leaders understand why they need more people like me in executive roles, overseeing their departments and leadership roles. And so I started writing about it, and that really attracted companies to find me, to say, hey, like that thing you wrote about, we're struggling with that problem. I found champions inside companies that said, wow, we're struggling with, really making use of qualitative, or like my leaders don't even care about the qualitative. Like we just only make decisions based on numbers. And so people started asking if they could retain, like if they're like, could you consult for us? And then eventually I had 1, 2, 3, 5 clients, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm making money. I don't need a job somewhere. I am my own job. Like I have a consulting firm, and that's really where I've been the last 10 years, I would say, is consulting companies on this transformation, this digital transformation. Now it's called digital transformation. Like that's, official word inside business sector. And so that's been really the secret, or kind of the story behind the word global tech ethnographer that no one can pronounce.
Yeah. So you were consulting for the last 10 years. When did you first hear about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Web3? Can you remember a moment when you kind of had that moment where you thought, this is going to be something, or this is going to be our future?
Yeah, I remember distinctly. It was my business partner, Sunny Bates, who's my business partner, mentor, and then became one of my closest friends. And she's always ahead of the curve. She is one of the founding members of TED. And she had said, we just started talking, and she explained to me, well, even way before that, my partner was buying Bitcoin with pizza. And this was like in the late 2010s, like prior to 2010. So like probably 2008, 2000, I think 2009. I don't have the exact date of when Bitcoin was launched,
Mhm.
but like it was right around then. And I remember, they were in New York City and just telling me about this coin that they were collecting, and they were talking about it as if it was a collectible, so not as like, truly the next economic revolution.
Mhm.
But then when I started to look into it and heard them talk more about it, they're like, no, actually, like it's really amazing that like no one controls this currency and there's a limited supply. And it just got me so interested. And then I started hearing about it from my business partner, Sunny Bates. And really then a lot of my open source friends started to talk about this as like much of the return to the early Web 1 days, where prior to Web 2, when the internet became commercialized, right? So I think many people who are listening to this will probably forget, but there was a point when the internet first started, it was very idealistic, and the idea was that people would have their own servers, and we build peer-to-peer networks, and everything would be open source and mesh networks, and it wasn't commercialized at all. And it was like before cookies and advertising and all the stuff. And it was like, they talked about Web 3, but it was language that I was very familiar with, distributed, decentralized. And so that's when I started to really look into it more and just realize like, wow, this is a thing. As someone who is always on the edge of technology and trying to help our clients understand what's coming next, it was something that, I just had to pay attention to.
Tricia, you explain Web3 so well. I've listened to you explain it in a couple podcasts and videos. Could you just explain that Web3 in a couple sentences, just for our listeners, because I think that's important, especially for our students to just really understand it. And then tell me what it means to you.
Okay. So there is no agreed upon definition of Web 3. I don't even know what I've said in past podcasts. I'm curious what you found and like past talks, but my definition of how I explain Web 3 is that it is what I call a Schelling point, which is a Schelling point is when you have a lot of energy, of things coming together without any communication, but it's coordinated activity. So it's a paradox, right? How do you have such coordinated activity without communication? And the Schelling point of Web 3 is people coming together over these ideals that we can build, a digital experience where people have more control over their personal data, over assets, and it's not about top down hierarchical control. That's just simply like it's much more about, again, returning back to the ideals of Web 1. And for me, what it is personally is that it is a socio-technical construction. What do I mean by that? Is that technology is never neutral, and then all technology has social structures built around it. And so Web 3 has there's actual technology, like where we can say, let's just strip away the social part and the cultural part. There's the technology of the blockchain, of the actual, how do you know what the blockchain stack is, right? And how does it actually function? What are the different layers? What are the different code, like types of coding language, software language that you need to build the blockchain? How fast does it go? Latency, scalable, all stuff. But then there's the social part of like, what are people's hopes and dreams and desires around how this technology is going to function in society? How is it going to further certain ideals? And that's when it gets messy. That's why it's a socio-technical construction. Some people think this technology should be leveraged to make as much money as possible. Some people are leveraging this technology to say this is a return back to Web 1 ideals. Some people don't even know what Web 1 is because they weren't even alive. And so they're thinking, well, this is an opportunity for us to build a better economic system that is fairer. Some people, and it really depends on the context of who you are. If someone is identifies, literally their identity, if they identify as a libertarian, they see this as an opportunity to be free of government control. It's so you see all of the people putting their ideology on top of it. You're in the medical field. A lot of people who are in the medical field are saying this is an opportunity to really fix the problem of electronic medical records, right? The EMR field is a total mess. And so a lot of people are like, well, maybe that's the way we can fix that. Some people are saying we can fractionalize ownership to real estate, because that is, maybe they're a real estate agent, or maybe they believe that housing should be more equitable. So depending on what your personal values, ideals, and purposes, or your interests, people take this technology and like say, well, it's useful to solve this set of issues, And so, and as a result, what I see over, and what I always study is, as a sociologist, is I like to like go one level above even the micro, meso, macro, and just be like, what does this whole entire aerial perspective look like? And what I see is that it's very repetitive of the ideals of Web 1, or any kind of hopes and dreams that we have over technology, is that it is going to solve everything. Right? We had this around AI. We had this around the internet, where it's like, once people have access, everyone's going to be able to get a job or upskill the way they want. Or social media, once everyone is connected, that's like literally Facebook's ideal. They say like, we're about connecting people. Like once people are connected, people will feel better. And it's like, no, it actually has spurred wars and misinfo. But early on, when a technology is being introduced to society, there's very little nuance and criticality of like, well, how do you see the technology for the whole breadth of what it looks like once it's inserted into society? And that to me is the most interesting part, is like what I see with Web3 right now is that a lot of people are frustrated with our current systems. Our institutions are falling apart. Trust in the government, trust in each other, trust in society is at an all-time low. America has become very violent. And people don't feel, a lot of people, more increasingly, people don't feel safe. There's low trust in policing systems, in particular if you are a person of color, or if you are Black, in particular Black males. Like there's just like everyone that has a reason for like something they don't trust about the government, or and there's like, we don't know if the earth is going to like survive, right? And so what I see is that everyone is putting they're saying, well, this new thing called Web3 could solve all of it. And I've seen the same narrative with AI, social media, virtual reality, VR, and the internet. So that is to me what I find fascinating about Web3, is looking at what are the actual, like, what's the conversations around it, and how people see it as like this magical solution, when really it's not, because humans are humans. We are always going to have problems, and we're always going to, once you insert a technology into society, people will never agree on the best way to use it. You will have, people who will abuse the technology. I always talk about, it's not great to put everything on the blockchain. You have to think about the context. Let's say you're in an area that's had, centuries of wars, and ethnic wars. Do you want a ruling party to put, potentially put everybody's names and identities on the blockchain, and then create, blockchain enabled genocide so you can track people forever? Like, we really want to be thoughtful about that. Transparency is not automatically a good thing, nor is it a bad thing. And my whole point is, there's no good or bad. Like, we have to get rid of that Western binary that like where we're very judgmental of like, this is good and this is bad. And it's like, no, every technology, just like a person, is, has a spectrum of uses, and it really depends on the context. And you have to figure out what is the most appropriate technology stack, which likely blockchain is never going to, is rarely ever like a thing on its own. It should be one day like TCP/IP. When you send an email, you're not like, oh, I'm using TCP/IP to send my data and break it up into packets so it arrives there. You're not exposed to those guts right now anymore, because the technology has evolved. And the same thing, I think the more we integrate blockchain appropriately for the context, and you have more people who are designing it with awareness around what's the use case and then how do you choose a technology to go with it. And if blockchain is useful, really the person using that technology shouldn't be like, I'm using blockchain now. It should actually be built into the system a bit more invisible. I think it's a while until we get there. There's blockers, but these are early days of a technology, so it totally makes sense.
So you made some good points. One, that some areas on the blockchain should be anonymous and then some shouldn't. So it's based on different scenarios. We have to decide what's best used for that use case. So that's very interesting. I didn't think of it that way, but you're absolutely right, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're anonymous, that it's important all the time. And that's why I think regulation has been so halted, because how do you punish someone and get to somebody that's anonymous? So
Yeah.
you have traveled the world. You have studied villages, communities, people, and their technology, and their use, in their homes. And I watched your TED Talk from 6 years ago, The Cost of Missing Something, and you described how you predicted the smartphones would be the future when you were at Nokia. Now, can you tell me, just thinking about currently digital finance, this era, and then digital personhood, because that's a big thing. What have you observed as far as what we are missing? Have you seen anything when you looked at your thick data, you realized that these small communities wanted to be a part of the world with the cell phones, and you predicted that? Nokia obviously went in another direction. What you're observing around the world and from your experience, is there something that you're seeing that maybe we're missing in blockchain and Web3 and cryptocurrency, that may be halting or kind of stalling innovation in general?
I think the biggest thing that we're missing right now is, I'm going to say, is from the perspective of the planet, is that we are really missing out on how to leverage, how to get people and nation states and governments to understand the importance and value and the urgency around climate change. And I think what we're missing is a way to involve people from a non-moralistic and ideological way. I think the whole climate change space is very ideological, where it's very politicized, right? Mm-hmm. It's very politicized, and you see these divides, and it should be the thing that really unites us all. But you see this with like BlackRock. You have states, you have governors saying we're divesting from BlackRock because they measure ESG, and that BlackRock CEO Larry Fink had said, we're investing in companies that have clear ESG goals. Or you see a really big division around this, and I think the biggest thing we're missing is actually ensuring finding realistic ways that are not about ideology, not about politics, and introducing and involving and harnessing the power of billions of everyday people and also corporations to participate in the biggest mission ever, which is to reverse and to stop climate change. And I think this is the most intersectional issue of our time. What do I mean by intersectional? So intersectional is, if you have, it's an intersectional means like, it's not just a race issue. It's not just a gender issue or a sexuality issue with climate change, because you have like different isms, right, of things that you can care about when in terms of fighting inequity. But climate change brings all of that together, because no one is immune to the effects of climate change. Cyclones or melting glaciers that then trigger all these other things, or warmer weather or desertification. It doesn't look at whether your racial background or your economic class or what nation you're in. It affects everyone. And so it's an intersectional approach is saying we can't just be siloed in our way of, actually looking at oppression. Is that actually there's intersecting issues of gender, race, history, trauma, collective memory, and all of that comes together. And so for me, climate change is that, and I think what we're the big thing, the biggest cost of missing out on this is that our Earth will it will be irreversible, and future generations are really going to have to figure out how to live in a world with increasing wars, an unhealthier planet, because there's going to be massive lack of resources from the climate because of climate change. There will be more wars. I mean, look at what's happening. Look at what has happened in Syria, that where it was desertification that massively catalyzed and contributed. It's not only that, it's not that there weren't issues before. So I don't want to simplify it and be reductive, but it was desertification and, that prevented people from growing food, and like that triggered a war. And we are going to be dealing with that. We're already seeing that. Is that the amount of warming and the amount of issues in our climate are so big. And so if there's anything that's really where I'm turning in my career, is I'm actually focusing the rest of, I think, my time on this earth to working on climate issues. And I never saw myself as someone who's in the climate space. I have friends in the climate space, and I'm like, oh, you're so annoying. Like, why are you telling me that I have to get the right recycling box? Because I don't have time to make a decision. I go to Whole Foods and there's like 10 options. I'm like, this is dumb, right? So I'm never one of those people where I just wasn't. So I'm being honest. It's like, I am not really a recycler because, first of all, like you look at it, you're like, oh, most plastic doesn't even get recycled and it costs more to do this. And then you think about all the resources add up to create recycling. You're like, is this actually making the world better? Recycling often just like your plastic ends up in landfills because most plastics aren't recycled. So there's just like so many things. Like, I'm not an ideological person. Like, being from California, it's so dumb that the government spent time passing a law that you cannot have plastic straws. I agree plastic is bad, but really, out of all things we have to fight, do we really need to put a ban on plastic straws, right? But because of a New York Times article where I showed like someone found a turtle with like a plastic straw up its nose and it was dying and it couldn't move and get the straw out, people like flipped out, and it gets into this kind of like, people got into a frenzy, very progressive, climate change, liberal people freaked out. So like, there's extremism on all sides. I have friends from all political parties and all parts of the country. And for me, it's very important to not get caught up in the ideology of stuff. And I can observe my friends, they can go through, have their own ideology, own experience. But I really was not a climate change person. And I still don't think I am, in the way that like I see a lot of my friends are, where like, you can't drive a car, or you have to like really the cognitive overload of like everything you do. Like, do you know how many times you're flying, Tricia? Like, and I'm like, look, that plane is going to take off with or without me, So that is the last thing I'm going to think about. If I need to see my grandmother, I'm going to freaking fly once a month to see her, And like, but so there are a lot of ideological climate change people, and I think we need to stop that, because it doesn't make it practical, and it actually turns a lot of people off. And so my goal is, what I want to do is focus on where I think where blockchain can, and that's why I'm really excited, where I think blockchain can be most helpful. There are many applications of blockchain, but for me, the thing I'm most excited about is personally to explore, how do we use the blockchain to bring new biological assets into the market, to create a market? And for markets to function, you need to have transparency. And for markets to function, you need to have scale. And I'm really interested in how we use blockchain to bring transparency to new biological assets. And the asset that I care most about is carbon. And it's not because I care about it, it's because like, that is the one thing we know that can work to reduce, reverse or stop climate change, which is we need to draw down more carbon, because carbon is emitted by, by gas-powered vehicles like planes and cars, and gases. It's released by big industrial agriculture, or like, big, farms of cows and stuff, the methane, right? So that all contributes to, create trapping carbon in our atmosphere. So the one thing we know that draws down carbon is regenerative agriculture, which is sustainable agricultural practices. And that's something that we don't, increasing with industrial agriculture, small farmers are losing out. And so one of the, you have small farms disappearing because they're being bought up or it's not sustainable. They can't make enough money to survive. And so, but we know that drawing down carbon, you need a diverse, sustainable farm. And that's called regenerative agriculture. It's not monocropping, which is what industrial agriculture does. And so my interest is, how do you use a blockchain to really create transparency around how much carbon you're drawing down? How do you use the blockchain to really give buyers of carbon the confidence of what they're buying, the provenance of the carbon? So buyers of carbon are like companies or everyday people in the future who want to offset their carbon. And so I'm really interested in working with companies that are trying to create that behavioral change. And so two companies that I'm excited about is Reseed.farm. Reseed is a company that works with small shareholder farmers to draw down the carbon. Mm-hmm. And 80% of our food supply comes from small shareholder farmers, not big agriculture, right? So if they're gone, we're screwed. We need to be able to, really help small shareholder farmers increase their income. So by drawing down carbon, they get rewarded by the purchase of the carbon with money for stewarding the carbon in the earth. And so you need data to track, to verify that a farmer did this. And so how much of that data or what part of that transparency, the carbon being brought into the market, should be stored on the blockchain? So I'm interested in that. I'm interested in and Future Card is another company where it's like offering people who have credit cards points for actually acting in more sustainable ways, like buying secondhand or vintage. So I think this is like all products that meet people where it's at, as opposed to being like ideological from the top.
Well, what better of a person than you to take this on and consider this? And we need somebody in the digital world, in this digital era, because people are talking about the environmental impact on cryptocurrency, Web3, and then just our digital world in general. So what better of a person to be able to accomplish that, get your thick data, and be able to show the world what you can do. So you keep on going.
Thanks, Sunshine.
I want to thank you for your time today. We are out of time, but I want to thank you for your contribution to Web3 in the future and working just towards positive change. Before we go, though, we have 1 minute left before we stop recording. I have a surprise for you. Every interview, we end with the Crypto Lab Speed Scholar, which is a game that I made up. And
oh my God, I love it.
1 minute to get as many questions. And then the winner at the end of the Women in Crypto Month will be crowned the Crypto Lab Speed Scholar. Okay.
Okay. So I will probably lose because I have the worst memory. Let's see.
What did Cindy O get last week? I think she got 6. Yeah. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. On your mark, get steady, get ready.
Go. Get steady and ready.
Get steady and ready. Smallest unit of Bitcoin. You can say pass. Huh?
SAT. Did you say smallest
yes,
issuance? Yeah.
Satoshi, I'll give it to you.
Yes.
Password to your crypto holdings. What's it called?
Your passphrase, your private key.
Yes. Transactions on the Ethereum network that carry a fee. For every transaction, the user must pay the amount of
gas.
Yes. We are good. Online storage for cryptocurrency provided either by an exchange or a third party.
Filecoin? Wait, what did you say? Storage
online storage for cryptocurrency by an exchange or a third party.
Is an exchange or they custody it?
Famous early crypto exchange that became insolvent due to hacks in 2014.
Mt. Gox hack? Yeah. I don't, okay.
Yes. Known for pumping Dogecoin.
Yes. No, Elon?
Yes.
Musk?
Oh, you did really well. Let's see here. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think you are tied with
I got close.
Very good, very good. Well, Tricia, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate you. When you come to Cincinnati, please look us up and come visit our lab.
I love
Love
Cincinnati.
for
One of
you
my
to see the
clients,
students.
Procter Gamble, was there, so I
Okay,
love Cincinnati.
definitely be in contact with us. Good luck to you.
Cool. Thanks,
Rule the
Sunshine.
world, slay the day, and take
And I want to say that I'm super excited by the lab leadership under Michael, because this having a professor who's so, really with the times and also looking at the edge, the university and the students are super lucky. I wish I had a professor like that when I was in school.
Dr. Jones is truly amazing. So he's doing good things
Yeah.
here. So, but please come
Cool.
visit us.
I will.
All right. Bye, Tricia. Take care.
Okay.
Wonderful day. All right. Bye-bye.